Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We are back with an Ask VL, and we've got a couple of great things we want to talk about. First is the Res Judicata, which is a collection of law firms all across the city of Chicago coming together in Lincoln Park and forming teams and running a 5K to raise money for the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services Foundation. So we had my wife try it out last year. She said it was an amazing experience. And this year, Vogelzang Law is going to have its own tent, a lot of runners, including myself, and it happens to be the very week right before our run, the Meso Race for Justice. So a great warm-up. I know some of you ran the fun run this year, so this is the final warm-up for Meso Race for Justice. So we'd love to see you out there. Stop by our tent. You'll see the big VL Vogelzang Law tent. It's in blue and white, and it should be an excellent time. There's also time to register for our race. We have many people registered already, I think close to 100, so we're not going to cap it. We'll allow as many runners as we can get because obviously it's a fundraiser for mesothelioma research, and the more the merrier. So today one of the big topics we're having is diagnosis of mesothelioma and how it can be done earlier, how it can be screened for, and we've got an exciting new development by Dr. Harbit up in Michigan, and he is working on something that they worked with for 9/11 victims, and that is a breath test for people to see and analyze what is in the breath so that they can tell if people are predisposed to mesothelioma. Right now, they're looking for 300 mesothelioma patients, ideally 1,000, and if they can analyze all of that breath using, it's a special mask that you put on and you breathe for a while, and then they send it to the lab and they see what the difference is between a person with mesothelioma and a person without mesothelioma. And the hope is that eventually you can do something besides becoming short of breath and having fluid on your lungs, because usually by that time the cancer has advanced to a pretty far along stage. And sometimes you can still do surgery and chemo, and sometimes you can't. So whatever we can do to figure out how to find the cancer as early as possible, then you can cut it out or chemo it before it's grown too big and strong. That would be an amazing development for cancer research and just for mesothelioma specifically, but then we'd be able to use it in all different cancers. So if you or someone in your family has meso and you're interested in this test, check it out. It's on our website. It's on the blog section, and you'll hear Dr. Harbit, that's H-A-R-B-U-T, and he gives a webcast, and it does a whole question and answer about this test, about the development. It is some really cool stuff that I think you'll enjoy listening. If this cancer has affected your family or touched your life in any way, it's part of the reason that we want to always try to give back to this cancer through fundraising efforts, because we've got a long way to go with this cancer, so the more we can do, the better. And then another question from the legal side is whether or not the diagnosis, when the diagnosis occurs, how does that affect your legal case? So one of the questions is, okay, there's a couple questions packed inside there. I've been diagnosed with meso and it's very late stage, or my husband or my father has been diagnosed with meso and it's very late stage, meaning they can't do anything for it and they told him to just go into hospice. What can be done from a legal perspective when the person can't even really sit and have a conversation or sit for a deposition or talk about their work history? And unfortunately, that's probably 10 to 20% of our cases, so we have the ability to, a lot of times that person has worked with a family member or has a coworker that they remember back during the years of exposure to asbestos. And so the health of the patient, while it is relevant and obviously we'd love to be able to sit down and work with that person, we can also recreate the job history through loved ones and through coworkers. And like I said, many times, maybe 20% of the cases, we do have to do that. In the case of an early diagnosis where they say, okay, you just got diagnosed, it's very small, we can cut it out and hopefully you can have many years to live, you say, okay, then is there a reason to work on a lawsuit right away? There's a couple things to keep in mind. The first is that you've got a 2-year statute of limitations from the date of the diagnosis of the cancer. So from that perspective, yes, you can wait. There is an issue, a slight issue. If you start getting sick, if you're doing chemo, it's really a challenge to balance chemo or feeling bad with trying to remember everything. So we always encourage our clients, if you're feeling well or well enough, now's the time to jump on this situation so you can preserve it and be done with it, and that way you can focus on your medical care. Now, the other issue is, what if, do I need to do it, should I do it early or should I wait for it? And really, I've just covered most of that. So hopefully that answers your questions about diagnosis. There is one other issue that I was trying to remember, is what if someone has already passed from mesothelioma, and is there anything we can do in that scenario? And really the answer is the same, is that we go, and that's probably about 10% of our cases where I never had a chance to meet the client. And we do the same thing. We work with the coworkers, we find family members, and we recreate the asbestos exposure through the memories of those that were close to the person who passed away. So there's a lot of options out there, and hopefully this answers some of your questions. I always appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'm always happy to step away from some of the heavier parts of the litigation, meaning, you know, the sickness, the death. That's always tough to talk about. So I always try to talk about the race and our fundraisers and our golfing and everything else that we do to support the disease and work with the great doctors across the world that work on mesothelioma every day, and the lawyers, of course, because without the lawyers, a lot of this couldn't be done as well, including a lot of fundraising efforts. So thanks again, appreciate it. I hope you have a good week, and I hope you grab your last chance at summer for these last couple weeks before the kids go back to school. Thanks for tuning in.